All right. So we're back again with the PEM podcast. We took a little break there, had a lot of different things going on, and been working through building Psychedelics, been dealing with multiple legal battles at one time, the political situation environment that I'm in. And so ready to start back up again. And this week, with this episode, I'm going to just talk about the current environment with the political situation. I don't have a political leaning, so I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you that red or blue is better, or either side of that has any real impact on your life, because I actually don't believe it does. There are impacts going to happen with either side that may be nuanced and different. I do think that the current regime has taken advantage of the situation to really solidify their power. And maybe it was a wise move on their part, but I think there may be some short-sighted things happening. So the first thing I want to say is, for those of you who either support or don't support the current regime and those folks that are in power, obviously we've got Elon, we've got Trump. First question is, do you think that they are really the ones running the show? So to understand a little bit about those who have really run the world and run the show in the past, I think we would look at the Bush dynasty and then understand how far back that went with George H.W. So George H.W. Really was probably running the country for a very long time before he ever became president and before he ever became director of the CIA, which he then denied having any involvement at any real level of intelligence experience, which was at the time controversial, because here you have a guy who's becoming the director of the CIA and didn't have any formal CIA intelligence experience. And of course, that was all BS. The guy had enormous intelligence experience. He was part of the OSS, which is the Office of Secret Services during World War II. He was involved with a plane wreck, which there were some questions about how that all went down and who jumped out first as the plane was going down. I believe he was the only survivor in that wreck, which he was shot down. But obviously the guy had actually been in military service. He was a serious guy. He was actually a very scary individual. And his best friend, I don't know if it was his best friend, but a good friend of his was a man named Alan Dulles. And Alan Dulles was a truly scary individual. His expertise in life was the assassination of foreign heads of state. So that tells you a little bit about how hardcore that dude was. And him and Bush built the CIA. They were the ones that kind of shifted from the Office of Secret Service to the CIA. And then Bush played a role politically that entire time. So we're talking post-World War II in the 50s, all the way up to H.W.'s appointment to director of CIA, and then his being elected to President of the United States. During that time period, he had enormous influence, and he was deeply involved with petrochemicals, oil money, things like that, and was shaping the face of kind of international power structures and large, scale monetary interests, especially in petroleum. So he was an extremely powerful force behind the scenes. Is that what we're seeing now? So is Elon really running things? Is Trump really running things? I think when you want to understand who's running things, you should try to understand more about who's running the CIA. And that's my point to talking about H.W. is that he was very clearly running the CIA the entire time. So if you understand who's really running this country, I think you should try to understand who's really in control of the Central Intelligence Services. And that is neither Elon or Trump. Appears that a man named Peter Thiel has something to do with that. And, I don't know quite enough about it, but his company Palantir that he's invested with is deeply involved in really high-tech kind of target acquisition stuff, drone stuff, things involved with intelligence gathering and targeting, enemy targets and things like that. So, and Peter Thiel is like the owner of PayPal and Airbnb and a bunch of other companies, very, very wealthy as well. He's a billionaire. So I think it's important to frame it that way because people seem to think they know, and I don't think we know. And I think that's been the case for a long time. We certainly didn't know with Bush. I don't think we know now, and I've been saying that for a long time. These folks who think they really know what's best and what these guys are all doing, yeah, I think you're seeing what's on the stage, not what's actually going on, behind the curtain, which is what really matters. The other thing I'd like to say for those of you who really do support this current regime, or really either side for that matter, because in my opinion, what we have is a government that's ruled by billionaires, and there's a term for that. It's called plutocracy, and plutocracy is when a democracy is infiltrated by private moneyed interests, and obviously that affects your vote and your ability to have an even representation across the board, because instead of average common folks getting representatives who are truly loyal to them, you get people who are influenced by the billions of dollars that are being used to influence the way the government operates. And I think we're clearly seeing that. The other side of that is this kind of duopoly notion that people think that blue and red are just really so different. And yes, they're different, and I think they represent maybe different cross-sections of billionaires, but they both represent billionaire interests. And so when you're a commoner thinking that your vote in either side of that equation is really supporting yourself, I think it's rather naive. Now, for those who say, oh, well, these guys are saying they're really going to do all this to support the common folk and raise our quality of life situation, I would put it to you this way. If that were the case, let's say we're going to run with that, then historically speaking, royalty has always looked out for royalty. Let's not mince words about this. We are talking about royalty here. That's who these people are. Classes are no different than the 1700s, 16, 15, 14, going all the way back, right? Royalty's royalty. We're just the peasants. We're just renting here. We don't own this world. In that model and understanding that model, how much has royalty really given a shit about the peasant class, about commoners, your average citizen? And historically speaking, it's been a very small amount of give a shit that these folks have ever had. And the only times where you've seen a difference in that has been with some rare individuals of uncommon and extraordinary convictions and values around morals and ethics. And so my question to you, if you're someone who supports this current regime, is do you think that Elon Musk has an extraordinary and uncommon conviction to morality and ethics? And do you think Trump similarly has an extraordinary level of conviction and belief in morality and ethics? Or would you say they're about average? Or would you say they're below average? The answer to that question is really important, because I think the only way we can have a belief rooted in something that's reasonable is to be able to assess and say, yes, they are of absolutely extraordinary moral and an ethical conviction. And then we can trust that they are actually doing what they're doing to raise the quality of life for the common people out there. I'm not going to say which one I believe. I think just look at it and you tell me, is Elon Musk an extraordinary individual of high ethical and moral conviction? Extraordinary. It has to be extraordinary. We're talking Nelson Mandela. We're talking Gandhi. We're talking Mother Teresa here. I don't even know. Mother Teresa sometimes has some things that people disagree with. But yeah, we're talking very high-level, extraordinary sacrifice for the average person and an ethics and belief that's shown through action that's where they're at in their heads. Is that what we have today? Are those our leaders? All right. I'll leave it there. Let's see what we got today. We got some videos we're going to respond to and do our normal thing. So let's see what's up.
All right. Okay. Perfect. So, it's just 10 seconds of Elon doing the gesture.
Yep.
But we'll show it and then
Yep.
talk on it. Yeah.
Yep. The old gesture. I don't know how many of you guys have seen the Bill Burr did a thing on this. He talked about it, and it was hilarious. He said it wasn't just the Heil; he did the full Sieg Heil, and Bill Burr has his opinion on it, which he's very funny, and I think you should watch Bill Burr's opinion and see what you think. But I would say this. First of all, understanding historically, and actually, when this happened, I decided to kind of research a couple of things. Very minimal research. I didn't spend hours and hours on this, but I kind of wanted to see some history on a few things. We know that Elon Musk is actually African American. It's hilarious, right? No, he's from South Africa. So, Elon Musk is from South Africa, and he's from apartheid South Africa. He was there for that. And then, remember, I just mentioned a man named Peter Thiel that has a strong association and history of interaction with Elon Musk, and that's Peter Thiel. And Peter Thiel also was in apartheid South Africa briefly, a shorter period than Elon was. But there's something you should know about apartheid South Africa, which is, when you dig into it, it's actually not that surprising when you think about what they did there, as far as violating people's basic human rights, and as far as just absolutely mistreating everyday folk, especially folk that were of a different color, different ideology, different race, different creed. In this case, the black South Africans. It turns out a great number of post-war Nazis basically escaped Germany and went to a lot of different places. One of the main places they went to was South Africa. And so it's no coincidence that South Africa had that political structure and ideology of treating people like they're less than human. And so it turns out, frighteningly enough, that Peter Thiel's father, his name's Klaus, was a full-blown Nazi. And so it's kind of a tempting prospect, I guess, for them to briefly move to apartheid South Africa and then decided to emigrate to the United States. Elon Musk's grandparents, I believe, were Nazis. So it's a little frightening because you're talking about people who have actual ties to the German Nazi Party, the people who annihilated millions of Jewish people and people of other races and creeds and people of disabilities and things like that. So that's the historical background in a nutshell. There's probably a whole bunch of nuance and depth to all of that. But you have a man who is coming from apartheid South Africa that has generational ties to the Nazi Party, stand up here and give that gesture, we'll call it, that salute. And we got people trying to say, hey, it was just a mistake. He's just a little socially awkward. He wasn't thinking about it this way. Maybe he's kind of on the spectrum, whatever his deal is. And he was just saying, my heart goes out to you. This whole, the heart goes out. And then he did the gesture. And there's people out there, I don't know if you've checked it out, but there's people out there who said, hey, here's a ton of alternatives to how he could have said, my heart goes out to you, right? He could have done this thing and done a different, there's all these different ways he could have done this. Instead, he did this thing, which is, it's concerning, very concerning. We can't say for sure we know what was in the guy's head, but you're on a major political stage, right? All these eyes are on you. In those situations, you're very aware of what you're doing. I mean, unless there's something really, way mentally off about you, I guess. But, everything you're doing is communicating to the entire nation about what your intentions are, what your values are, who you are, and what you're trying to sell the American people. And that was the choice of gesture, and it was repeated. He did 2 times or did it 3 times? I don't know. He did it more than once. One time was enough, right? And then there's like freeze frame. If you slow that down and you look at his face, and I don't know, the facial expressions are always 100%, you can go by them, but it's not like he had some warm and cozy smile on his face. You slow those down and freeze frame, because I've done a little bit of dive on this. He has He has a cold look in his face when he's doing it, and it's reminiscent a bit of some of these Nazis that you see doing this shit. You know, Himmler and Hitler and you know, Mengele and all these guys, and you watch them do their salutes, and they don't have a great smile on their face about what they're doing. They're murdering people left and right. I don't know. You know, I guess you can try and explain it away and go, yeah, he just fell into the moment and had this, you know, mistaken gesture that was a little insensitive. It just seems like a stretch. It just seems hard for me to buy that one. Like if I'm a betting man and you give me options on wagers, and one wager is he knew what he was doing and he's a full, you know, Nazi sympathizer, or it was just a strange coincidental movement that he really just meant my heart goes out to you, and it really was just you know, an unfortunate choice of, you know, sequence of movements. Which one would I put my money on if I was really trying to win a bet? I mean, for me, it's kind of an easy one. I just, it's just hard to explain that one away. It's such a sensitive topic. It's never died down in sensitivity. You kill 6 million Jews, and somewhere between 50 and 70 million people die globally during that war, during that conflict. It's just, the sensitivity hasn't gone away. So you to be that insensitive to do this whole Sieg Heil thing on accident seems hard. It's hard for someone to convince me of that. I'm not saying I know. I don't know. I don't think any of us know for sure, but it's enough for me to go, okay, we need to have a conversation about that. I need some answers. I need, you know, more. I want to at least see what the reaction is when I'm sitting right across from you and go, hey, what is this deal, bro? What are you doing here? You know what I mean? What's that about? And I want to see how you answer that. And I want to really understand it. And even if you do answer it well, it still leaves a bad taste for so many people, including myself. You know, I think, and that's why Bill Burr's opinion was kind of good. He was like, you know, I can't believe we're at this point in time where there hasn't been more condemnation about it. Enough to where there would at least be a real serious response, right? There wasn't enough condemnation where it's like, oh, you know what, Elon's really going to have to answer that now, right? Like, it feels like there was a time when there would have been a different response to that, where people would have hit him so hard that he would have had to go, okay, we got to have a very serious conversation about why I made the unfortunate choice of movements, right? It's an odd time we're living in. But yeah, I have a major problem with what he did there, enough to where I think it should be answered for. Because as Bill Burr did put it, he said, I thought we reached a point in our society where we agreed that what happened and what the Nazis did was extremely morally deplorable. Outside of a few dudes with some strange ideas that want to maintain that ideology, there's, you know, the majority of us feel that these were some bad guys, right? And now Bill Burr is kind of questioning, well, what are we living in? And I kind of have to wonder myself because I think I'm in a similar generation as him, and I grew up with parents who actually witnessed World War II, at least one parent that was old enough to witness World War II, and my grandparents were around for World War II, and I had the stories of the Nazis and heard about that. We had family members who were actually knew Jewish people or went, you know, and there was a clear condemnation of that. In fact, my father, who witnessed World War II, wasn't old enough to actually fight, but he had a real problem with TV shows like Hogan's Heroes that made light of concentration camps. He didn't find it funny at all. So, yeah, I don't know. I got to say, I'm not leaning on the side of Elon on this one, guys. That's just me, though. What do you guys think?
Yeah. My mind always goes to like giving people the benefit of the doubt, but
That was a tough one, dude.
yeah, I'm 99. I'm 99.9% sure it's not this, but for me, like I'll get nervous sometimes about not doing something, which makes me do the thing I'm so nervous about.
Mm.
So like for example, I have a client. who has about 10% use of his left arm
Mm-hmm.
and about 1% use of his right arm.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll still throw punches. And
Yeah.
in my head, I'm like, do not fucking hold for a cross because you can't throw one.
Yeah.
And I do it.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking so hard, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And then boom, my hand goes up.
But that might be, see, that I think that's more complicated, and I'll tell you why. Because you have automated muscle memory systems that are built in from holding pads so much that a cross is something you've held thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of times at this point. I don't know, who knows, but enough to where that's an automated thing that's hard to override.
Right, okay, yeah.
It takes an enormous amount of awareness, which is frightening to the argument that we're talking about, because that means that he's done this thousands and thousands of times. So it makes it kind of worse for us. I don't know if you're. Yeah, so I don't think you helped there, bro. I have to tell you, don't think that helped. Yeah, don't think that was helpful. Yep.
All right, so I got 3 left.
Yeah.
These next 2 are 30 seconds.
Mm.
We're already 20 minutes in. So
Yeah, I had a lot to say. That's
it's okay. It's good.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll see how we're doing after one of them, because I want to make sure we get the last video.
Sure.
So I'll do the more gnarly one. So this one is a woman who got stabbed over a $2 tip. So the delivery driver was unhappy about a $2 tip.
Mm. Mm.
Police in Florida have made an arrest after a pregnant woman was repeatedly stabbed over the tip she gave for her pizza delivery. Brianna Alvello is now charged with attempted murder. Police say she was upset over the $2 tip on a $33 bill delivered at a motel near Orlando. Alvello and an accomplice allegedly returned and stabbed the victim 14 times, and police say they did it in front of the victim's 5-year-old daughter. Police are now using surveillance video to locate the accomplice. Despite the multiple stabbings, the victim is recovering.
Damn lucky to survive that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. A $2 tip. It's interesting because we're going to start taking a dive into economics, and it seems oftentimes people are blaming the wrong person, right? Did we see a quick shot of the motel where it happened? It looked like maybe that was it. That did not look like the Ritz-Carlton to me, right? Was this, you know what I mean? There's no justification for stabbing someone over how they tip you. So first of all, let's get that straight right now. If you can't handle that some people are not going to tip well, you shouldn't be in the service industry. Clearly this woman is insane. I mean, that's sociopathic behavior. That's absolutely out of control. To attempt assassination, because they actually plotted this, right? Pissed off about the $2 tip, then come back, had to do some sort of surveillance to wait for the woman to come out, or did they knock on the door again? I don't know, but they had to put a lot of effort into this, and then stabbed her 14 times, they say, or something like that. Very lucky to survive that. Yeah, I mean, first of all, you're targeting the wrong people because they're not the ones that are creating the economic problems. Second of all, it's not really the way to go about it with violence anyway. And too bad the woman who was stabbed wasn't, a self-defender and carried a firearm or something like that, because you're getting shot dead then, and I would have no problem with that. Yeah, I mean, I'm all for forgiveness and stuff, but in the moment of something like that, I'm going to defend my life, and too bad for you if things go wrong for you. I think we got a lot of angry people in the world. They're angry because life's hard economically. I think economic struggles are a huge part of what's fueling mental health outcomes and mental health problems. This is a woman who's got a mental health problem. Let's just frame it for what it is. That's absolutely insane to do something like that. And so why is her mental health suffering so much? And it's because I think our entire system is compromised, and that's my point to my openers. These billionaires are interested in furthering their interests with endless greed. It doesn't matter how much they have. There's people out there who believe, and this brings this up a little bit. I've spoken to people about this, like, hey, do you really think Elon Musk cares about you? And they're like, oh, well, look what he did. And there's all these, ideas around Elon and how maybe we could frame it as him being, very ethical or whatever. When you dig into where he could be ethical, I'd have to do the entire argument, because I actually went into everything he's done. So he's open sourced, Tesla, right? That actually is helping him because he's dominating the electric vehicle charging stations. And so open sourcing Tesla, helps other competitors build electric cars, but then in the end that just makes Elon richer, right? And there's all these arguments, we can go into them. But the truth is that for most people, it's getting harder economically. I came from a place of, let's just put it how it is, like dealing drugs. Yeah, I was in the cannabis industry, but let's just boldly state what it is. I was a trafficker, I was a distributor, I was a transporter, I was in that world. I wouldn't even do that now. It is so hard to jump a layer. I was just talking before we started this episode about a movie called Layer Kick. Layer Kick's a great term for this world we live in. And there's a moment in that movie where the billionaire, he's a billionaire, and he explains to the character that's played by Daniel Craig that, he's in a layer cake, and that when you start off young, when you're born and not born into a wealthy family, you're going to take a certain amount of shit. Like, shit flows downhill, and life's going to be hard. And then if you work hard and hustle hard and make some smart moves, maybe you jump a layer. It's getting harder and harder to jump layers. It's getting harder. It's getting so hard that people are upset. And what about healthcare? What about support? All the decisions that are being made when we talk about the war on drugs, and people really support this, like, oh, we got to be hard on fentanyl. They're missing the actual truth of the matter. Is the drugs and the restrictions and the way you're handling this is actually making everything worse. You want to come down hard on fentanyl, make it the death penalty? Do you think it's going to stop the demand? It won't stop the demand. What it's going to do is, let's go to the extreme and say that was the death penalty, if you were caught with, even a gram of fentanyl, it's going to create a really strange environment where fentanyl is worth an enormous amount of money. And I don't think we'd be able to morally and ethically stomach the idea that 1 gram of fentanyl is deadly to someone, from a criminal justice perspective. So that's not going to work, right? So where do we set that bar at? And where do we decide, oh, this person's a dealer and poisoning our society, what have you? It will just make those who are willing to take those risks far richer. And it won't diminish demand. And if you look at Iran and see what they did, that's exactly what they did. Their addiction rates skyrocketed. So people became more miserable because you create this dark, ugly atmosphere, and you maintain the class lines where they're at, so you're not getting any richer, you're not getting any better health care, you're not getting more support, you're not getting better housing, all the same things that are keeping people addicted are keeping them addicted. They're staying addicted because of the sociological environment they're living in. And then you're just going to come down hard on something that ultimately is just going to make a bunch of people richer. That's all it's going to do. And not just the cartels. It's going to make law enforcement richer. It's going to make the rehabs richer. It's going to make the pharmaceutical companies richer. It's going to make the privatized prisons richer. It's not going to make the average person any richer, healthier, happier. And that's why this stuff is happening. It's a mental health crisis. It's a mental health crisis that is based in socioeconomic standards and what they are, and inequality, and financial inequality. And, it's not going to get better until we make a change. And I try to give people tools to manage mentally in a world that's messed up. That's the idea, is like, how would you manage mentally and not go and stab someone in the face for giving you a $2 tip? Well, there's a lot of discussion there. The 8 fundamentals of mental, emotional, spiritual skill development are what's required here. We got a very disturbed person who did a horrendous act in front of a 5-year-old. I'm not into retribution, so I would say, hey, lock her up with the predators. But I don't think that's going to teach her anything. And that's another thing I was going to talk about. Kindness, and people hate hearing that around something like this. Kindness is something that's missing. We aren't kind as a society, and even to our people who deserve to be locked up. That woman needs to be removed from society. She's a danger. But my definition of justice may not match yours. My definition of justice is the achievement of the perpetrator understanding the full weight of responsibility of the damage that they cause to society, to their victim, to themselves, to the family members of the victim, to the family members of themselves, and understand that fully at its depth. That should be the definition of justice. And because if that's your definition of justice, you'll change the way you approach it. Because then punishment doesn't seem that effective in bringing about awareness. And if you want to see society change, you need awareness to change, not more fear. Not fear of doing something. That's the problem. Fear of doing something doesn't seem to stop people, right? How many people are afraid to commit murder? I mean, I think most people on some level have a certain, fear of that, but plenty of people still commit murder and murder one, who I'm sure have a fear about it. They still do it. Fear seems to be limited in its effectiveness. It has an effectiveness. I'm not saying it's not effective. I don't see it anywhere near as effective as awareness at that level. So getting someone to understand the full weight and depth of the impact that they've had on people who are real human beings is, in my opinion, what justice is. So, yeah, it's an unfortunate incident.
Okay. I think I might go to just the last one now.
Yep.
The one we're skipping, it's not that interesting. It's just kind of nuts.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
like it was a Starbucks drive-through, and it was another delivery driver, and the lady in the drive-through didn't put the cap on all the way, and it spilled on his lap and like gave him like crazy burns.
Did he sue?
Yeah, I got 50 million, and it just happened 3 days ago.
That's not new. That happened with McDonald's, if you remember. It was a famous McDonald's case where the same thing happened, and people were all up in arms about, well, they shouldn't get that much money. Coffee's hot. You should be more careful. But nevertheless, the lawsuit went through, and McDonald's, I forget what that lawsuit was for. It was a lot of money. It was in the multi-millions as well. So it's not a new thing.
Have that happen to me, man.
Right.
I don't care.
Right. Well, it's interesting because I wonder how those lawsuits are done. So they had to prove that the cap wasn't on, and who...
They took the indoor
surveillance.
Yeah. So it happened in 2020, and he just got the payout 3 days ago.
Wow. Yeah.
But anyways, so this one's just a minute. It's funny, I think. But,
Okay.
But it's not meant to be.
Yeah.
It's if people treated cops the same way that they treat us.
Oh, I might have seen this as a bald guy.
I think so.
Yeah, I love this guy. He's awesome. No, go ahead. He's good.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So you start putting on gloves and shit.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
we have some uncooperative individuals in here.
I think it was you guys are calling about though. I don't have any issue with you guys recording.
No, we're not. So we got some uncooperative individuals in here. If you could just get them to.
So I actually got called about you guys.
So if you can just get them to comply with our investigation, that'd be appreciated.
This guy's great. I love this guy.
Well, so what we're doing is we told them that they're being very uncooperative. Why don't we step out of the doorway so we're not blocking any traffic?
Why don't we step out here?
Well, why don't we step out of the doorway? If anybody wants to.
Outside?
No, ma'am. I need you to cooperate. Ma'am, I need you to cooperate.
I need you to cooperate with me.
Is he putting on the gloves? Yes, I love the gloves.
What's that?
Can you cooperate with us?
I'm conducting an investigation here.
Well, so are we.
Okay.
Can we answer some questions for you?
Yes, please. Come on in.
Sure.
Thank you. Ma'am, please stop being combative. Do as you're told. All right, we want to sit down so we can relax.
He's good. I think he's going to gain some traction with his channel. I don't know what his viewership's probably already pretty high, but those ones are where I don't know when he started doing that because I don't think he started that way. I'm pretty sure he was just a normal auditor, and then he came up with this genius idea, and it's absolutely genius. It's gold what he's doing there because it shines a perfect light on the way that these authority figures treat the average citizen without any substantiating evidence to a crime, right? That the RAS, right? Reasonable articulable suspicion of a crime in order to ID, in order to detain, in order to do those things. And you get a lot of cops thinking that they can just order you around, tell you what to do, get ID without any real probable cause. And that's, it's funny that he does what I love it. I've seen a couple, that's another one. So he's been doing a few like that. He did a different one where he was actually very serious and he was not playing around. And that one, I don't know what building he was in. He might have been in a social services building. He was in some sort of social services building. I guess they all are. But it was, I don't know if it was, probation department, something like that. And he got fed up. And at one point, he said something to a cop. The cop was like really getting aggressive with him and talking down to him and sarcasm and all this shit. And he goes, would you take my life right now? If X, Y, Z happened, I forget exactly the setup. He's like, you'd probably kill me. You'd probably take my life right now. And the cop was like, oh, and kind of sidestepped. And he didn't say no, which was interesting. And he goes, yeah, that's funny. He's like, well, you know, how many people out here would do the same to you? And it was like, whoa, that was getting into dangerous territory, because he didn't threaten him, but he said something where I was like, but it's exactly the truth. You know, some of the more heinous things that police officers do, how long are we going to put up with it? You know, how long is it going to be before someone goes, no, I've had enough, or you kill the wrong person's family member, or paralyze the wrong person's family member, or brutalize the wrong 75-year-old woman. You know, we've seen a ton of these now. It throws some 75-year-old woman to the ground, knee on her back, all like insane amount of force, tasers, you know, for the same thing with older, you know, we saw this with an old Asian man. He was like 75 years old. I think they punched him in the face and threw him on his head, you know, stuff like that, where I don't know how long you're going to get away with that till someone says, no, I'm going to find you and you're going to have a real problem now. And I think there's people out like that. Unfortunately, they don't, and I'm not advocating for that, by the way. I don't think that's the way. I think as a society, we should demand that our institutions not allow this to go on, and that we eliminate that nepotism and corruption from law enforcement, and we eliminate qualified immunity. We should not allow, at least we shouldn't allow qualified immunity to where it is. The idea of qualified immunity, if you understand, does make some sort of sense. Because if you're enforcing the laws and you had zero qualified immunity, then you know, anyone could try and attack you personally and sue you personally for every time you enforce the law. I do kind of see where it's coming from, although even then, right, like if the case is clear, the laws were followed, the officer did nothing wrong, then it still wouldn't hold up in court, right? I guess it's so that they don't clog up the courts with endless amounts of people trying to file cases with people who are legitimate criminals, who broke the law, who did, you know, X, Y, and Z, and then are just angry about it or want to find a way to fight back. You know, you can't allow that. So I get why it's there, but we've allowed qualified immunity to go way too far. We've allowed the thin blue line to go way too far. It's really interesting. Yesterday I was at a birthday gathering, and there were several police officers there. And I watched them interact with each other. And there was a new police officer. He's been, this is in the jiu-jitsu community. He's I don't know what he's trying to accomplish, because something happened. He wasn't able to get through the first time. I think he didn't pass the psych eval or something, right, where that's could be concerning. But anyway, then there's several cops in the class, so then they're like, hey, well, maybe try this way or maybe do this. And I'm not paying attention. I don't want to be a cop. I don't particularly like cops. I'm not going to say I dislike them. I train with them and they're cool, but I'm not cop friendly because of this stuff, because what we see with the tyranny. And you know, I watched them at the birthday party, and there was this very strong affinity amongst them. They're going to support this guy, and they're like, hey, give me a call. You need this recommendation. You need this guy. And then there was also a lot of talk of like some stuff that I really didn't like, that made me not like them so much, even though, like I said, they're in the same class with me. I roll and train jiu-jitsu with them. They were talking about one guy, they broke his wrists, another guy, they broke his ribs or something. They were kind of even talking about it in a way where it seemed like they thought it was sort of funny a little bit. Yeah, you know, I think we need more guys like this. We need to push back against those that we have given our trust to and given enormous responsibility to, and then they're held to a lower standard than we are. That's what the real problem is. And not even held to a standard of common decency and respect for human beings. So that's oftentimes what I see with these, law enforcement guys, more often than not. And that's the real problem, right? You understand there may be a couple bad apples out there, that's one thing, but that's not the case. It's the other way around. And I think that's part of the problem with power. That brings me back to my opening statement about how to assess, and if you want to convince me that Elon and Trump and these guys are really out to better society and better us, the common citizen, then you need to convince me that these guys have a higher than normal, not just a little higher than normal, extraordinary level of convictions around, ethics, values, and morality. That's what I would need to see. And we see it at the microcosmic level, way below that level of executive power when we look at police officers. Their actions, and what we see a lot of, and what I see more often than not, is that entitled, arrogant, tyrannical attitude versus the type of attitude that is humble and is the public servant and is there to stop crime if necessary. That's what they're there to do, and support the public, right? It's unfortunately, the way I see it, it's the opposite. It's more of the arrogant, tyrannical, domineering, egotistical mindset. So that's why we need guys like that. We need the First Amendment auditors. We're very lucky to have the tech that we have that's now starting to hold these guys accountable. They're not getting away with it as easily now. So happy to see that. But yeah, because in order to be a good cop, you would need to have a very high level of moral and ethical conviction, enough to fight against the temptations that are there. And I don't think we're seeing a lot of that these days. So it's a good thing we have some folks trying to hold them accountable. And then this guy, I think it's just gold. Yeah, putting on the gloves. I need you to cooperate. I need you to settle down. I need you to do as you're told. How about you have a seat? I wish he had said that. Please have a seat. I wish he had said that. That would have been a good one too. Anyway, sit on the curb. Yeah, it's a good one. That guy's channel's awesome.
Okay, go ahead and close out.
All right, guys, that's it for this one. We're shortening the episodes down a little bit. Don't have the same amount of time as used to have building and doing all these things that I'm dealing with. But hopefully you got some value from it. We're always trying to find the non-egoic path forward, the path of awareness, the path of consciousness beyond, I think, what's been our primitive way of life for the past 10,000 years for humans. I think it's what's brought us to this moment here of an all-time low in mental health and destroying our resources and our environment, and having this extreme political strife and the feeling that many of us feel like we're not represented. That's why we've chosen something different, right? That's what happened. Trump is something different. Let's choose this. Hopefully he's really going to make a difference. I think he is. He's going to make a difference. Is that difference going to be better for us? I have my doubts. But, ultimately, I'm attempting always to remove my own ego from these conversations, to give a picture for others and some understanding on the benefits of removing their egos, and collectively as a society, us trying to remove ego from the way we conduct business, the way we interact with each other, the way we build a future together. So, all right, see you in the next one.
Boom. All right. Okay, now we'll go with the George St. Pierre episode.
Yeah.
These ones are good.
So this one's about health?
This one is ego,
Ego.
health, yeah.
Ego and health, okay. Ego.
He kind of talks about how this, I don't want to spoil anything.
No, that's right.
Yeah, okay.
I got it.
Okay.
I just wanted to get an idea.
Yeah, and then the fighter one is they're both kind of like, oh yeah, well, I'ma fuck you up.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of ego.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, we're back again with the PEM podcast. That's pragmatic ego management or pragmatic ego mitigation, however you want to put it. And that's important. I want to make sure we always circle back around to the intent of the channel and what we're doing here and understanding what is the definition of ego. Because some folks out here, and I've seen it in the psychedelic community, have a certain definition of ego that is too global. And so what it means in the end is when we start to shine a light on my definition of what ego is, which I see it as completely negative. I don't see any redeeming quality to it except for one, and I'll explain what maybe the one redeeming quality is. But for the most part, all nothing but darkness, all nothing but negativity. It's because my definition of ego is not as broad as theirs. So I have a very specific and limiting definition of ego, specific to a side of human nature, human interaction that I see as all negative. That's responsible for all the ugly things we see in our world. The violence, the mistreatment of others, the abuse, the vast economic inequality. Things like in India where they were having a famine and they sold food out of the country, even though they had enough food to feed the starving, they didn't, right? Those type of things. Why are those things happening? Because of ego. Why do we see the damage that's been created? Why do we see what happened to the Native Americans, let's say, or the black Africans that were brought here, or any of the horrific things we've seen? All, in my opinion, comes down to ego, into my definition of ego, and then police brutality, mistreatment in Western medical systems, the enrichment of many interests through the war on drugs, the way that we treat the homeless, regardless of what your political leanings are and how we solve that problem. Why do we treat people in callous ways and show a complete lack of kindness? That's all ego. And it leads to our own misery. That's the thing that's really important to understand about ego, is that even when you're winning, so if you're winning in the ego game, if you are a Donald Trump, you're president of the United States, you're top of the totem pole, you're completely the most powerful you can be, for those folks, it's never enough. For those folks, it's always empty. There's never a place of being whole, complete, happy, in a state of harmony and love with one's fellow beings and fellow creatures, fellow species. Look at how we treat our fellow species. Look how we treat the entire world we live in. It's all based on ego, and that's why this channel is here, is to talk about that, and then to understand that when you want to address this problem, that you can't address it directly. Ego is a very strange beast. It's a very strange animal, and you have to be very careful about how you approach it, because approaching it in certain ways actually exacerbates it, actually inflames it, fuels it, feeds it, and oftentimes those are the direct ways. So directly facing ego with direct opposition is almost always the wrong way to go. There might be a couple times where it works, but it's rare, and it has to be framed very carefully, because direct opposing forces with ego is it's pretty common what we see, and we'll see that in like a road rage incident. Someone cuts you off, you flip the guy off, that guy flips you off. Then it's like, hey, let's pull over and fight. Okay, we'll escalate further. Hey, you know what? You got a gun, I got a gun. We shoot at each other. Where does it end, right? And it feeds on this back and forth. And ego is very contagious. It's extremely contagious. And it takes a lot of awareness to not allow the trigger to flip. And that's where we talk about a neural pathway model of ego, and then there's also a metaphysical model of ego. Either one kind of has the same idea of reinforcement. So as you reinforce ego, you're further and further into that mindset and space. And the less in control you are of yourself, actually, you're at the mercy of that egoic framework and that escalation, and then either feeling great that you've dominated and you're superior, or feeling shitty that you're inferior and haven't dominated and constantly on that roller coaster. And even if you have been on the winning side of that equation, then it's what's next and what's next and what's next. The ego can never be satisfied in the moment. The ego always lives in the past or the future. It never lives in the present moment. And I just saw something very recently by Eckhart Tolle. He's got something going on. I'm not sure, but I really like Eckhart Tolle. And he said, hey, there's an addiction that we don't talk about. It's possibly the biggest addiction on the planet. It isn't in the news articles. It isn't in the media. It isn't talked about. What is the addiction? The addiction to thinking. And I thought that was absolutely epic. And I don't know how many of you will understand that, what he means by that. I understand it very well. The ego only lives in the world of thought. It does not live in the no-mind area. It doesn't live in the meditative space of mental quietude, of stillness within the mind. It only lives in the thinking mind. And so addiction to thinking is clearly a facet of ego. It's the ego wanting to keep you in its den, within its sphere of influence. Once you leave that sphere of influence, it has no power over you. And so ego is a very interesting animal, like I said. All right, so let's get into some videos and see what we got.
All right, here we go. This one's freaking awesome.
I'm not leaving my body going up like this. I'm leaving it going up like this, looking down.
You're seeing yourself?
Yeah, I'm seeing myself, and I'm still aware that I'm in the bed. It's like I'm in two places in the same time, and I'm not alone. There's something that sort of lift me up. And I'm gonna draw it to you. So this thing that I see appears to me under this shape. It's called a keyhole shape, they call it. No eyes, no mouth, no, like this shape.
What color?
It was no color, just translucent. It's not like I could see it with my eyes. I was seeing it inside of my head.
Right, you were perceiving it, yeah.
And it was communicating with me, not like I'm talking to, hi, how are you? Like in my head, like a airdrop, you know, like shoop and shoop. And everything he was thinking, I was receiving, and everything he was thinking, I was receiving. So it was like a connection, you know? And as I'm going up, I see myself. I even see my friend. He was texting someone. And I told him, I'm like, after the adventure, I told him, I said, you were texting this person. And he said, how did you know? I said, I went over your shoulder, man. I saw it. And I'm lifting. And I go through the ceiling. I see the house. And I'm like, to the opposite of what happened a few minutes before, when the first time when I didn't want to lose control. Now I feel very confident because this thing is carrying me, and I feel like the best feeling in the world.
Safe.
Like safe, love, successful, confident. Like I feel like I'm in the up top emotionally. Like I feel like I'm like the best feeling in the world. Not physically like high, but mentally, like, man, feel like in perfect harmony. And as I'm going up, I'm like, who are you? You know, who are you? And it says, I'm you and everybody in the same time. I'm the air you breathe and the water you drink. And it didn't say it through my mind. And as I'm going up, I see the town where I am. I see the planet. Then it made me understand that it says to me, like, I know why you're here. You're curious to know about what is consciousness, and I'm gonna show it to you. You know, I'm gonna show you what is consciousness. And then I see the map, the planet, the solar system. It's like I'm going out. Like I zoom out, you know, from where I was, and I see the entire thing. And I see the galaxies, the universe, the different dimension. To the point that at one point I'm like, how can I explain? It's
too much.
Okay, it's too much. I can't take it anymore. It's like please, I don't want to know more. I just can't take it. And it was very weird. I'm the one who sort of tell him, it's like, and the whole time this thing is with me, sort of guiding me. I'm in a feeling of harmony, and I'm telling it. I'm like, is it only for this adventure? Will you leave me after this? Or he's like, no, I'm gonna be always with you. And when things doesn't go well, close your eyes and remember me. Always gonna be there, even after this adventure ends. I'm always there with you. And I'm like, okay. And then it sort of says to me, it's like, now that you know what you came for, I would like to share something with you. There is a lot of time that you do things that you don't realize that you hurt people. I'm like, okay. And it's like, I'm gonna show you things, but after you've seen it, it's up to you to make the effort to change, because I cannot make the effort for you. You have to make the effort if you want to change and become better. I'm like, okay, this thing made me sort of go through the perspective of the person that I was hurting.
Wow.
And live the emotion of that person live when I did that. I live it, and now I understand. Like a mirror, like if I would have done it to myself. And I felt the emotion running through. It made me very sensitive about stuff that I've done. I call certain people and I apologize to them. I thought they would have find it weird that I called them, but a lot of them, they were like, they're like, oh, thank you very much. I mean, you come a long way, and I appreciate you realize, and it means a lot, and it sort of made peace. I made peace with it, and it felt great. Towards the end, this thing again, I always pointed out, it's like, now, George, I know you all grudge a lot of anger. You grew up with a lot of anger. It served you for what you did for your fighting, but now you have to learn how to let it go. It says to me, it's like, you're gonna have to do like a detox, and it will manifest physically. I start feeling a little bit sort of sick, and I have a bucket, and I felt very good. But now, my friend, I dive down deep. I'm on the bathroom, in the liquid, comes out crying and throwing up. Please, I can't take it, and it comes back to me, lift me up, I'm like, okay, I'm ready, okay, go back in it, and then I cry, and it comes back, it lift me back up, okay, we have to go back, it's almost done, okay, I'm doing it again, okay, go. When it was done, man, I felt so light, it felt so good, physically and mentally. How do I know this experience is real after when I'm done? I asked it, I say, how would I know? And it says to me, I will give you a gift that only you will know. And I didn't realize what it was, the gift, but now I know. I used to be scared of height, like crazy scared of height. Even when I go up in a building, I look down, I feel like it shake me to my core. But now I know, since my experience, I don't have that feeling anymore.
Whoa.
Yeah, I swear it's true.
So that's like a personal.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like a personal confirmation that what I live is real. From my ayahuasca adventure also is the fact that I'm under the impression that consciousness is something that linked everything together. That we're all ones in the same time, that we're all different.
Yeah.
Yep. That's an ideal experience right there. So there's a lot of different ways I could comment. The last portion of his statement there about the nature of consciousness, that we're all one, is what I've been saying for a while, which is why the criminal justice model of punishment doesn't work. And the idea that you can cut someone out of your life for good and never speak to them again and never have any impact from that is erroneous as well. So that means that we're forever linked to everyone else. So when somebody has harmed us, we're forever linked to that person. We can choose how we deal with that connection. From the perspective of someone who's been victimized, that's where forgiveness becomes really important. And there's a lot of misconception that we've addressed in past episodes, that there are those out there that believe forgiveness means allowing the individual that perpetrated whatever it was off the hook. It does not mean that. Forgiveness does not mean forgetfulness. It means not harboring something within my heart that then imprisons me and imprisons my spirit and my mental, emotional, spiritual well-being. And that's a selfish thing. Forgiveness is a selfish thing. Because it's a realization that it's the Chinese finger trap. You know, you keep pulling your fingers apart, it traps you further, and makes it impossible for you to pull your hands apart and get your finger out of the finger trap. In order to get out of the finger trap, you have to go in, and that's what forgiveness is. It's very similar to the Chinese finger trap, and it's really for the self. It's not for others. Relationship repair is a different thing entirely. It has an intersection point with forgiveness, because there can't be relationship repair without forgiveness. But forgiveness is not a direct indicator of relationship repair. Forgiveness can be very much just a personal and even selfish thing to a certain degree. So just a lot there that could be unwrapped and looked at. And we've, over the course of different episodes, we've talked about several themes that very much align with what George St. Pierre is saying there. When he leaves his body and he's going up and then he's communicating with what it sounds like to me is the overguiding, connected spirit of all things, or if not that, a facet of it. I've had similar experiences to him, but never in the form that he explained it. So he saw it as like this keyhole. And maybe that was his subconscious's way of addressing what he was interacting with, because it sounded like he was really interacting with the universal spirit, the great spirit. If you're Christian, you might call it God. You know, if you're Muslim, you might call it God. If you're, you know, Taoist or Buddhist, maybe you have a different term for it. If you're practicing Candomblé de Congo, you would call it Olodumare, the overguiding spirit that has no gender, and it is the universal, you know, spirit that's the creator. For whatever reason, he visualized it and saw it and experienced it in the way he did. I haven't experienced it that way, but I've definitely experienced it multiple times. And in that place, you overcome ego. You're beyond ego. You supersede it. And that's where you start to realize these things. He was able to realize that he was going down the second mountain. He was going up, I should say, the second mountain of awareness, which is the awareness of others. So clearly he hadn't been up that mountain before because he didn't understand the pain and harm he had caused others. And that takes a lot of work. You have to go up the first mountain first of awareness of self before you start even going up that second mountain. And then you start to even go up the third mountain, which he was going up as well, realizing the interaction between himself and the other person. That interaction in itself is another level of awareness. At that level, you've transcended really the ego at that point. You're beyond this addiction to identity and who you are, and this overconsumption and obsession with what people think about who you are, and this, you know, representation of yourself that you want people to see. You go beyond that at that point. And in some cases, you can definitely go beyond it and still be in the thinking mind. A surefire way to go beyond it is to be beyond thought. But another way to do it is to reach different wavelengths within yourself. And there's one that the Toltecs called the place of no pity. And I've been there before. And the place of no pity is a very strange and interesting place. For me, the most powerful example of that place that happened to me, and not on psychedelics, I've experienced it on psychedelics too, but it happened to me not on psychedelics, was in a hostage home invasion situation I was in the end of, I believe it was 2007. And once I accepted that we were going to die, they were going to kill us. So their intention was to murder us in this robbery. It was a weed deal gone bad. And they were gangsters. They were Bloods from the local, I believe, Delman Heights Blood Gang in the IE, the San Bernardino area. And they were going to kill us, and I went through an enormous amount of self-pity and fear and all these things, and then something in me snapped, and then I transcended that, and then I was at the place of no pity. And I wasn't outside of thought. I still could think, but I was then in touch with what he was in touch with. So I got in touch with the overguiding spirit, and then that thing actually possessed me. So it's interesting how he's talking about it. I think words are hard to, they're difficult to use in order to explain what you're experiencing. He said that he was being lifted up, and then he would go through the purging. He was clearly purging spiritual toxicity through the crying, through the vomiting, through the things he was going through. And then the spirit would come and lift him back up. I experienced it as a puppeting. Like, it would actually take control of my body and act for me. And that was how we survived that hostage situation, because they were attempting to murder us all. Was that this, once you align yourself in a certain way, it's a configuration. It's a mental and energetic configuration. It's not just purely mental. You can't think your way into this space. You have to practice. So you have to, do emotional work. You have to do meditation. You have to do breath work. You have to do different things. If you were trying to achieve this state at will, it would be very, very hard to do, by the way, but there are people who are able to do it. It's not just thinking your way into that space. Yes, that's part of it. You have to have a belief system. You have to have things that support achieving that state, but achieving it's going to take a lot more than just, oh, I have a thought pattern that's going to bring me there. So it's beyond that. It's a frequency. And then once you're there, then you get to experience kind of this wisdom that's beyond, anything that you can really comprehend. And then that wisdom's not only wisdom around the idea of like thought and who am I and what's this world about, but it also can extend to actions and dealing with a dynamic situation in front of you, which is what I dealt with in that circumstance. So it's interesting for him to talk about it, but it's all in some way relational to ego. At those states of existence, you're outside of ego, and what a freeing experience it is. Enormously freeing, and that's what he experienced, right? When you're in a state of ego, then you don't apologize to the people that you hurt, because in your mind you've justified what you've done and why you've done it, and you're justified in what you're doing. And that's something you should understand about ego. Ego's number one tool, its ultimate weapon, is always justification. I'm justified in what I'm doing. In the road rage incident, I use the example of someone cutting you off and you flip them off. Flipping them off is your first, it actually happens before that. There are thoughts that lead up to that, an emotional reaction, an offense, a feeling of offendedness that takes place. Those are all the initial points of trigger for the ego. And then there's the action of flipping the guy off and everything. And in that, the justification is, well, this guy cut me off. And then if questioned further, well, so what, he cut you off, back off, just whatever. No, well, it could have resulted in an accident. He could have harmed me. He could have led to, bodily injury. He could have harmed my family that was in the car as well. And so therefore, I'm justified in doing this action. And that's how ego works. And there is no justification for road rage ever anyway. So it's a really interesting thing to see how it works. And when you're in that state, that's the state of mental imprisonment, mental, emotional, and spiritual imprisonment that we live most of our lives in. And then you have this amazingly freeing moment, in this case that's brought by ayahuasca, and then you get this ability to rise above a bit and finally see some things that you never saw before. I'm curious about the fear of heights, because I have a fear of heights. And interestingly enough, I have extensive psychedelic experience, but not with ayahuasca. I've done DMT, but I've never actually done ayahuasca, so I'm even a bit curious. And I think that ayahuasca, to some degree, is a little bit gentler than a full-blown bufo or straight, vaporized DMT experience, which is just so fast and violent that it hits kind of hard. So I am kind of interested in exploring that. Right now, I'm where I'm at. I'm doing daily practice stuff more than I'm focusing on psychedelic experience, but very cool story by George St. Pierre. Pretty awesome.
Yeah. Can you get anything close to that doing DMT?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Maybe I need to, because I'm also terrified of being stuck in that for hours.
Yeah, we got DMT vape pens that fucking send your ass, dude.
That's
But
like 15 minutes max, right?
yeah, and then probably would say don't drive for an hour.
Okay. Shit, dude. I kind of want to do that. Okay, I think we can knock these last two out.
Yeah.
I got about 25 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, this is 2 minutes long. This one's the ego between Rampage Jackson and Kevin Holland.
Check it out.
Learned throughout my life is people don't like my sense of humor. Fuck it.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's usually, if you say fuck it to me, it's usually fuck you. So
Well, I didn't say fuck you. I said fuck it.
yeah, that's what I said. If you say fuck it to me, I usually say fuck you.
Well, fuck you too. I don't give a fuck.
Just to make it very clear, Kevin was going to come on the show. He was very gracious. You did this to MVP, which I thought was a great move. Hyped up the fight. Rampage made a joke on Instagram, and then Kevin FaceTime me, said, yo, if I come there, I got to fight.
The last thing he want to do is fight me, though. That's the last thing.
Nah, I still want to.
No,
I don't give a fuck about the fight on Saturday.
No, you don't want to fight.
I'm just being real.
I'm being real with you, young buck. You
I'm
don't
just
wanna
letting you
fight.
know.
I'm just letting you know.
This sounds good.
Sometimes people don't know what they want.
Yeah.
You don't want to fight me.
You've been known for talking loud. You talk during the middle of the fights. What is it about your style? What is it about talking during the middle of the fights, the way you're able to keep the energy going?
I think it's an ego problem. That's what I think.
Think it's an ego problem?
That's what I think. You say you.
I don't have much of an ego.
Since we've been
unless we're sitting across the table, we're both shooting 45-70s, and we're trying to see who can hit the target. I don't have much of an ego. Do you know what a 45-70 is?
No, I don't.
Okay, then shut the fuck up.
You'll tell me shut the fuck up?
Yeah.
Because
you don't understand what a 45-70 is.
He doesn't know what a 45.
You're talking about ego. Now I'm giving you some ego.
Okay.
Ego's when you don't understand what a 45-70 is.
Okay, so
that pisses me off.
That pisses you. Cause I don't know what a 45-70 is.
That fucks with my ego a little bit. What type of man are you don't know what a 45-70 is?
Because I don't know what a 45-70 is.
Yeah, that's kind of.
Because I don't know what a 45-70 is.
Yeah.
Do you know what a 45-70 is?
Hey, you shouldn't worry about ego. You should worry about being retired. That's what we had a conversation about last time.
Well,
You're a big guy.
I like the AR. That's what I'm trained on.
So what would you shoot in the AR then?
Say what?
What caliber you shoot in the AR?
What caliber?
Yeah, you said ego, so now I'm giving you my ego. This is where my ego
yeah,
steps in. So which caliber do you use?
Interesting. It's funny because I actually don't follow fighting that much anymore, guys. So the two gentlemen, who was the guy on the right with the cowboy hat? What's his name? Holland?
Kevin Holland.
Kevin Holland, yeah. And he's talking to, was it Rampage?
Yep.
Rampage is getting older, right?
Yeah.
He's got to be pretty old.
45-ish, maybe?
Yeah, he's getting up there to be fighting. Yeah, I don't really follow fighting so much anymore. I'm not as interested, honestly. You know, I'm interested in the art. I'm interested in the martial arts. When I catch fights, I want to see what people are using technique-wise. I want to see what they're doing. I want to see things about where their awareness is at, right? And the athleticism is impressive, of course, but athleticism is interesting, right? Because it has an expiration date, which is why when you get to a certain age, you can't do this anymore. So on the one hand, here's another way of framing this. That's the next thing. So now picture this same conversation 40 years from now, maybe even 50 years from now, and you know Rampage is in his 90s, and I don't know how old Kevin Holland is, but they'd be very old, right? Would that conversation make sense at that age, right? To me, it doesn't. I guess there's some old guys out there that still maintain this mindset, right? How long do you want to do this? Like, how long are you going to have that mindset about who could win in a fight, who's going to dominate? That's my point about where we're at as a species. We're so stuck in a primitive mindset that we're not going to make it to interstellar species because we're going to destroy our whole environment based off of the same kind of attitude and mindset there. And it's really funny to see the contradiction, right? Didn't Kevin Holland say he doesn't have an ego? And then all of a sudden he became all ego, and then he's like, oh, that affects. Then he said, oh, that affects my ego, and that upsets my ego. And it's like, well, you just said you didn't have an ego. Now it's upsetting your ego. It's just funny to see how ego works, right? And that was all ego. And then I don't know why Rampage had to say something about an AR. He clearly doesn't know much about ARs, right? Because he didn't even know anything about caliber questions, which should have been a very easy answer. You know what I mean? Whether he's using 300 blackout or 5.56 or 223 or what he's firing, he didn't know the answer to that. Which I don't care. That doesn't make me think any less of Rampage. But it was weird because he got triggered enough to even enter that conversation. Or he could have just said, "Hey, I don't really mess with firearms that much, so I'm not in that arena. So yeah, you're better than me with a gun because I don't. That's not what I do. So why are we trying to measure? It's interesting. What is the measure of a man, right? And then why do we even care what the measure of a man is anyway? It's really interesting because it's all kind of ego at the end of the day when we're trying to compare ourselves to others. For me, death has been an important leveler, and level setter around how I assess things. Anyone can win or lose a fight at any time. Things can happen that can affect the course of a fight. Yes, a trained UFC fighter has a much likelier probability they're going to win a fight against an average person or some weaker person. But even that, something could accidentally happen to where it could go wrong. A lucky shot, a finger to the eye, something that just changes the course of a fight in an instant, and it could happen any time. Nobody's invincible. So the ego mindset is really, it's really kind of pointless. Because then what's the end game? I am the greatest fighter of all time. Okay, I'm the best there ever was. And I think it's interesting, right? Because that's what Musashi was trying to achieve. I really like the story of Musashi. Something must have changed for him. I think it's easier for ego to exist in this combat sports world because death is a very low likelihood, right? Yeah, you get injured. Maybe you even get some brain trauma. Maybe you get some broken bones. Maybe you deal with a lot of pain. But how likely is it you're going to die? Pretty low. They do a good job of keeping people alive. There have been people who have died, but it's not a high number, right? But if you're sword fighting in, the 1500s and early 1600s Japan, that's a different deal. Death is right there. And I think maybe that had an eroding force on Musashi's ego, because when you follow the story of Musashi, and he fought these 61 duels to the death, including his final duel on the island with Kojiro, which is what they refer to him as. I don't know if that's his real name. There's some historical ambiguity about what the name was of the actual guy he fought. And then see the trajectory of his life. He becomes this beacon of light for everyone, because he achieves this extreme level of awareness because he's fighting to the death. I think death has this real powerful eroding force on ego. And I've seen it firsthand. I've seen it with myself. It has this humbling force, first of all. When you're facing death, it changes a whole lot. It'd be interesting to speak to some active duty operatives at a high level, people who face real combat, Navy SEALs, Delta Force guys, things like that. Talk to them about where they're at in their heads with this, especially guys who have been on mission, been there, seen guys die, especially guys who've been in those situations. I have a feeling you have to have a certain amount of bravado just to do that. We're the elite force. We're going in to kick the other guys' asses. We're going to take the pirates off the ship. We're going to free the hostages. We're going to go in and do whatever secret mission is we got to do. You got to be at you're at a pretty wild level mentally to do that. But I'm pretty sure the guys who are really seasoned, it'd be interesting to have a talk with them about this. I just feel like death has such an eroding force against the ego. And when it doesn't, I think that's the other side of the coin. Then you see PTSD. Then you see what happens when people aren't able to get around their own egos and have suffered, the realities of facing death and the horrors of combat, and then you go through this psychological, impasse zone, this dark place. You're not able to get around because you don't have the tools to manage it. And now you're back on stateside here in, relative peace, dealing with the financial struggles and taking care of the kids and the wife and whatever, and it just doesn't even, you can't even assimilate into that because you just don't have the tools. And I think that someone who's been through that type of thing, there starts to be a humility that comes with it, especially as you start to have the dark thoughts and the suicidal thoughts and the anxiety and panic attacks and the deep, deep depression. And then guess what? Ego starts to go out the window. You start to go, okay, I just need to find a way out of this. Like, who cares about if I can beat someone up or kill someone or better shot than them, or all those things. So those guys are living, honestly, rather cushy lives. Even though they're combat sports, they're tough dudes. I'm not saying they're not tough. It's still a cushy enough life to where they're afforded the luxury of that ego battle. Where some of those, I guarantee you, some of those guys on the battlefield in Ukraine and places don't have the luxury of that. It's interesting, even like the Zelensky interaction at the Oval, at the White House with, Trump and J.D. Vance kind of berating him and whatnot, right? His reaction was interesting, He's in a different position than J.D. Vance and Trump. They're not, Zelensky himself, I don't know to what degree he's putting himself at risk, but I know early on in the war, he could have been killed. I think there was risk to him personally. I think it changes your perspective. He seemed to do a pretty good job, actually, of dealing And I would say I haven't seen a lot of ego from Zelensky, at least publicly. So that's what I'm really looking for. And I feel like that interaction was a lot of ego, kind of, I know we shifted into that whole story, but that was interesting to see J.D. Vance and Trump just berate this guy and say, oh, have you said thank you? You haven't said thank you to us. We want him to kiss the ring, It was all very interesting ego. And then ego's interesting because it's so much entertainment and it's so addictive. That's why I think there's also a lot of support. People love ego. There's probably a bunch of people really loved this conversation between Kevin Holland and Rampage Jackson, where to me it wasn't really that. I didn't even find it that entertaining, to be honest with you. It served no purpose, and these are entitled guys. To some extent, that's entitlement. They're not facing death. You face death, I promise you, it's going to change your world. It changes everything. Certainly changed it for me. So that's why one of the main core concepts of ego management is using death as an advisor. When you use death as an advisor and you really understand and feel the presence of death and know that life is precious and very impermanent, these other things don't seem that important anymore. They're really not that important. How good of a shot you are isn't that important unless we're in a battle and you're shooting at me or shooting at someone or shooting at a target that's important to our survival. It's not that important. And are you able to do that under pressure? Have you ever done that with bullets flying at your head? Because that changes a lot of things as well. And I don't think you'd talk about it in the same way if you had. So to me, it's not impressive. It's just the same disease we're dealing with as a human species, and we need to get past it. And I got to tell you, I don't know that if we get past it, that we'll have combat sports anymore. I don't think that combat sports will make a whole lot of sense, at least the way they're conducted now, especially if they cause physical harm to people, right? I think if we're able to evolve as a species, we'll see a very different social environment. If we evolved as a species, we wouldn't even have an economic structure. We would not involve in currency exchange. My theory is that if there are alien species, which I'm pretty sure there are, that are visiting this planet, they don't engage in economic exchange, currency exchange of any kind. They're beyond that. They've developed and evolved so far past that. They're more like hive mind. They're beehives, but with a prefrontal cortex that's probably beyond our comprehension. So they're able to understand individual thought, individual experience. I won't say identity because that starts to link into that ego-excited things again. But also they live in complete harmonic interaction with others, so there's no need for currency exchange. There's no combat sports. There's none of that. There's just pure harmony, which I would much rather have than that bullshit pissing contest that we just watched, which Rampage kind of lost because he had no idea what were the potential calibers that an AR platform could fire. Yeah. Anyway.
Wild. Okay, last video. This is the funny one, just a minute. The to a free guy.
Mm-hmm.
If you buy anything from this entire aisle, you are ignorant and disrespectful to God. Oh, look, granola bars. Fructose, corn syrup, sugar, cornstarch. Oh, I'm gonna get these for my family because I'm ignorant. Oh, look, water flavors. Yeah, I can't just drink water and be grateful that I have water. I have to have a pleasure fest every time I consume something. And I want to teach my kids to do the same because I'm disrespectful to God and my family. Oh, look, canned coffee. Yeah, I need energy from a stimulant to override the fact that I ignore my God-given circadian rhythm because I'm disrespectful and because I've been scrolling social media all night getting offended by people saying that I'm ignorant. Perfect. Ooh, look, an energy drink. I'm going to take this to stay up past midnight scrolling social media even though my God-given circadian rhythm says to go to bed after sunset, but who cares about that? I'm ignorant. Besides, I can just take another one tomorrow. Guys, I look like this because I'm not ignorant when it comes to my body. I'm trying to inspire you. Much love.
Yeah, right. I it's an interesting way to frame it. I don't particularly like when people say you're disrespecting God. And the reason I don't particularly like that is because I don't think we need to worry about God. We don't need to stick up for God or worry about who's disrespecting God. And it may not be what he means there. I'm not saying that. But one of the places that I've evolved to in my ideology for myself is I call myself kind of the spiritual JKD practitioner, Jeet Kune Do. If you know anything about Jeet Kune Do, it's really the combination of any and all martial arts applicable to whatever situation is you're trying to solve. So are you grappling on the ground? Are you clinching on your feet? Are you dealing with striking? Are you dealing with close quarter striking? Are you kicking from maybe further distance away? Are you using a knife? Are you using a stick, which is changing your range? Are you using a projectile weapon, a firearm, etc.? And in that case, you use whatever's best for the situation, and you find what works best for your temperament and body style and things like that. And so it's extremely practical, and Bruce Lee was practically minded around the use of martial arts for solving problems in the combat area of things. So I see that with religion and spirituality, this idea that one religion is correct and another one isn't, is weird to me. That would be like saying what a lot of people say around martial arts, right? Like Muay Thai kickboxing, maybe some jiu-jitsu, some sambo, and some American boxing are what's needed to be a good fighter, and that's it. And so, Taekwondo is wrong, or Aikido is wrong, or Wing Chun is bullshit. Many people who say Wing Chun is bullshit have no idea and understanding of what it really is, because they don't understand eye poking and groin striking, so they don't get that that's what's really happening with Wing Chun. But yeah, I think it's very appropriate, that analogy with the spiritual world of things. So him mentioning God the way he does in the context of this food choice thing in the aisle, for some reason, strikes me a little weird. Like, why are we bringing God into this? It's odd to me. It's just odd to me. I'm a spiritual guy, and I just don't think we needed to reference God in that situation. Outside of that, though, I mean, he's right? Like, but I get he's making a point, but at the same time, like, is he shaming us, those of us that eat these foods? Like, I'm wondering, is he shaming? What's going on there, right? Is he bringing attention? I'm not sure if what he did is real effective. That's what I'm wondering. It's like, yeah, it's meant to be kind of funny, right, at the same time, but funny how? Like, funny ha-ha? Like, am I a clown to you? You know what I mean? It's like Joe Pesci in Goodfellas, like, you making fun of me, or are we laughing together? What are we doing here? I got a weird feeling from the whole thing, to be honest with you. I know it's kind of funny, but look, there's a lot of people out there who don't know any better, who've been raised that way by their parents, who are living in really poor, shitty environments. And again, the more you go to the same brand grocery store that's in the worst neighborhood in Detroit, or the same brand grocery store, well, that's probably too far away, but I guess we could say the same brand grocery store in, like, the Hamptons, right? You're going to see way better options at that Hamptons store. And then the awareness and the education around those things. Like, the problem with messages like that is the people who are listening to that message already know. The people who don't know, do you think they felt good about watching that? Like, oh, thanks, you're making, you're telling me I'm an idiot, I'm a dumbass, I'm disrespecting God. Probably a lot of these people who are Christian, actually. So they already are going to feel attacked by that guy, because they're disrespecting God because they drank a Red Bull, because they had to go work some shitty-ass job for 12 hours while they fucking dug ditches or, climbed fucking radio towers, or whatever the fuck they were doing for shitty pay in the Midwest, and this guy's making fun of them. So it's like, I get it, but it's like, I just think there's better ways of doing that kind of thing. There was just a strange delivery there. It was odd. And maybe that's just me. I don't know. I know what he's doing. I get what he's doing, and yeah, it's kind of funny. It's funny for those of us who probably shop at, Sprouts and Whole Foods and Lazy Acres and these real expensive grocery stores, and we can afford the best organic foods, and we can make those choices. And I know that, produce isn't always that expensive. So even at, like, your basic store, every basic store, including Walmart, right, offers produce. Who knows what GMO and pesticides they sprayed on it, but it is produce, and I think it's, for the most part, I think you're not taking too many risks with your health, as long as you wash it off and, eat some vegetables and, eat some real foods, not just grab a cup of noodles and a Red Bull and those things. I think we're reaching a time now where we do know. So for the folks who are taking those things, and they do know it's unhealthy, and I think a lot of people do know, right? Like, how many ignorant people out there don't understand that Red Bull is probably not great for you, or don't understand that eating McDonald's every day is not great for you, or don't understand that eating high fructose corn syrup and high trans fats and artificial kind of flavorings and colorings aren't good for you. I think we've reached a point where people basically understand that. But again, it's the same thing. Then why are they doing that? Because they're unhappy, because they're hooked into a bad system, because they were raised by parents who fed them that shit. And they're, you know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know, man. That whole video right there is weird to me. It's just kind of like, in a way, there's some similarities there to making fun of people who like smoke crack or smoke meth or do fentanyl or do heroin or whatever. Like, it's interesting because there's an addiction aspect to why people do these kind of foods, and he's clearly pointing that out, but he's not giving them a way out of it, right? Like, okay, you've pointed out these are bad things, but you're also maybe just making me feel shitty about myself now, if I'm one of those people, if I'm struggling with that. Like, oh, I'm feeling crappy now. Oh, this guy just made fun of me. Now, like, you know what I mean? And then the rest of us who laugh at it, haha, that's so funny. Yeah, you're so right about the Red Bull thing. I wouldn't do that. Or the high fructose corn syrup. Like, I would never do that. Then I don't even need the message, and I'm just enjoying that content from the perspective of entertainment for me, while I laugh at these other poor schmucks who are poisoning themselves and probably going to end up with cancer and everything else. Like, I don't know. Weird perspective for me on that video. I think you got to think about the way you deliver things. It's kind of like that talk, the George St. Pierre thing. Was that video there, like when George St. Pierre reached a point where he's like, oh, I hurt people. I did things that kind of suck for other people. Now I can see how those other people feel. That's what I get from this video now. I'm like, hey, there's some people who didn't appreciate what that guy was saying there. And I think the ones who didn't appreciate it the most were the ones who needed the message the most. So it's kind of like, then you're just making that video for views from people like me who might kind of find it funny or don't. I don't necessarily find it that funny because of what I see with it. But like for a lot of people who are maybe at that healthy, conscious level, they aren't struggling with getting their diet right. They aren't struggling with addiction to caffeines and things like that. And so they get to soak up that content and laugh at it and whatever. And so then what greater good purpose did that video really serve? I don't think it served a great purpose, to be honest with you. That's my point. So anyway, yeah.
Dang, dude. You're so good at that.
Yeah. I had to work on myself a long time.
Like you catch things that seem so obvious, but most people would never catch.
Yeah, I felt it right away.
But like right after you say it, it's like, oh, that's so obvious.
Yeah.
But you just like, what the fuck? Anyways.
Yeah.
Go ahead and close out.
Right. Okay. Well, guys, yeah, ego, right? And there was ego in discussion in every one of those videos. Very interesting. We saw a complete display of ego. And then we saw a different form of display of ego at that last video. And that was a display of ego as well. Sort of this judgment and shaming. There's also ego involved there. And then we, got George St. Pierre transcending ego and having this moment of realization of like, oh, I've hurt people. And, oh, I need to improve myself. And then feeling freed from all that because guess what? He's freed from ego. It's a wonderful feeling to be freed from ego, even for just a few moments of time. That ego is such a shackle on all of us, this huge ball and chain, this burden that we carry around, and we embrace it. We just love our egos, and we keep this thing that's just holding us down, holding our whole species down, harming ourselves, harming others, and harming other species on the planet, destroying our environment. That is what's doing it. It's just this ego. So it's weird that we have this loving relationship with it, this adoration of it, and it includes combat sports. That's why I'm saying I'm just not as into the sports the way that other people are because of all levels. Because it really is kind of this. And Eckhart Tolle talked about it within, like, for instance, NFL football and stuff like that. It's one thing, or even soccer, which is even crazier. People have killed each other over soccer games that aren't even participating in the game, right? They're just in the audience. They're spectators of a sport. They murder each other over whose team is better. It's insane. It's insane. And it's ego. And it's what I'm fighting against. It's this corrosive force that's holding us where we're at and damaging us further and further. And I'm trying to get us away from it. I'm trying to add some messaging to the world to say, hey, maybe think about this in a different way. I actually do like I love the, combat. I don't want to tell you I don't like combat sports, because it's not really what it is. Like there's something about the athleticism. There is something. Sometimes it's really cool when you see two guys that are truly respectful of each other, and it's like it's a good match, and you're like, yeah, right on. I think CTE and serious damage to your body is not a good thing, and you have to wonder why we need to take it that far. Because why we have to take it that far is because we're attempting realism. And that's another part of the ego. So we feel like MMA is real, right? Like this guy could really fight in the street. Yes and no. He's still fighting with rules, and now we've got more rules than we did when the first started. The UFC #1 was a little closer to real, although they still wasn't real. You couldn't eye poke someone, and I don't believe there was groin striking in the first either. And I think there was a couple rules. I forget what the other rules were. No biting, right? But that's real, and real goes way beyond that. Real goes to shooting, stabbing, poisoning, and that's usually where I like to go when we start talking about true real. The real world of killing is there's no rules, and I poison you, I distract you, I find a way to murder you because of whatever my aims are and reason for doing that. And there's nothing, when you look at it in that light, do you like the way that sounds? Like, I guess there's some people out there who would like that, like a Squid Game thing where you could poison each other and do whatever, and I'm sure a lot of people would watch that, unfortunately. And that just shows you where we're at, That was kind of, I posed this question too around what's going on with our current political structure, and I was talking to some folks, again, from the last episode when I was talking about extraordinary, ethical and moral convictions being the measuring bar to determine whether a billionaire is really fit to support and raise up the common class and the average citizen. I posed a hypothetical. I said, hey, imagine we had a situation where billionaires offered someone $1 billion, but you had to kill a child for it. So you have to kill a child, and the billionaires involved, let's say this was like a secret skull society gathering, you have to kill the child in front of them. We're talking a small child here. We're talking 4 or 5 years old. Not even just an infant either, but like a cute little child has to be murdered, male or female, whatever your choice, right? Innocent child. And if you murder the child, you'll be given $1 billion in entry into this billionaire's club. You will live as royalty for the rest of your life. And you won't get in trouble for the murder because it's all going to be covered up, right? Here's my hypothetical to you. How many people in this current world that we live in do you think would choose to kill the child? How many? Unfortunately, I'm suspicious that there's a lot. And I think that what we're talking about on these videos is trying to change that. That is not making us better. It's not making us happier. It's not making us healthier. It's not doing anything for us. We have to stop. That's a dark one, guys. I'm going to leave it there. We will pick it up on the next one. See you next time.